meeting. But most importantly, I want to welcome you because you are not only guests, but you are also friends. You are our friends and you are our most important allies as part of our formal partner organizations. And as you well know, we always have this kind of opportunity to debate and to exchange views and to continue to deepen our relationship. As you know, we will change slightly the format of the event today due to the fact specifically because we are online, and therefore I would like to ask Sandra Parthie, one of our members, a member from the German delegation, to moderate the session. Sandra, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Stefano. Yes, I managed to be here in the nice buildings of the EESC, so I hope technology will be fine. Let me start by saying to everyone involved, this is going to be live broadcasted, so it's public. We're going to be streaming this via Facebook and Twitter, so just that you all are aware of that. So we have a very interesting discussion ahead of us on shaping the post-COVID recovery to forge the future of Europe. And we have our, I think, most important, most relevant partner organizations represented by their top people today with us. Just very quickly, let me welcome Veronique Willems, the Secretary General of SMEunited. She's been with the organization since 2000, actually as the Secretary General since 2017. Then we have Markus Beyrer, the Director General of BusinessEurope, who's been with them for even longer, 2012. And then we also have Ben Butters, the Chief Executive Officer of EUROCHAMBRES, who's been with EUROCHAMBRES for a long time, but has just been recently become the CEO of the organization. So I'm really looking forward to having your views and your input on the topic of the post-COVID recovery. But before we start, I give the opening remarks again to Stefano to sort of kick us off in the direction of our debate.
Thank you, Sandra. And once again, I'm truly pleased. It's very difficult and unfortunate not to be able to see the faces of the people I am addressing. But once again, I'm truly pleased to welcome you here today for what is now our traditional beginning of the year meeting, to have an open debate between us, we the employers group, and also to listen to your issues, to your ideas, and I think most importantly to see how we can cooperate together on key issues. I strongly believe that we are all working to achieve the same goal, which in my mind is that of creating a European business ecosystem that provides opportunities for companies to grow, boost jobs, and at the end of the day, create prosperity. I'm deeply convinced that if we work well together, as we have been doing in the past years, we can continue to positively influence decision makers, to craft business-friendly legislation, and indeed to create the right conditions for us to be able to work in the right environment. Indeed, it is one of my goals, as you know, in the one-to-one meetings we've had, and also in the work program that I presented to the group upon my election, that we will continue to build closer relationships between us, and built already on the years of very good relationships that we have had in the past, and to continue to build on these into the future. As you know, also when we met, I had proposed that we would explore the possibility of signing a memorandum of understanding between the employers group and the 6 partner organizations on a one-to-one basis, and the Secretariat of Group 1 will indeed be sending a first draft to you for your review of this proposed memorandum of understanding to see if this is acceptable to you. And the idea of this memorandum of understanding is, of course, to create a framework within which we can cooperate, within which we can exchange information, and within which we can together organize events and activities. For me, it is also very important that we communicate and stay in touch with the people we represent. As you know, I also placed an emphasis in the beginning of my presidency on the importance of involving people like CEOs in our meetings. In my view, and this is also the view shared by the group, The experience of these people who are running businesses on a day-to-day basis, the challenges they face every day, should be the guiding hand of our work in the committee and indeed within the Brussels framework. I believe it would be very valuable if we, all of us, worked together to create a forum with CEOs of big and small companies in order to push forward proposals that work for businesses, particularly in this time where the EU and the world are going through unprecedented changes. As you know, the work of the Employers Group is framed by our priorities, which, if you had to bring them up together, I believe can be summed up as building a Europe where the digital and green transformations will bring lasting growth and jobs and will have ripple effects on our economy and our economic model, people's well-being, and indeed the planet's sustainability. For me, climate neutrality and digital leadership will not be an easy task for Europe. The transformative agenda of the European Green Deal is as demanding as it is compelling. And indeed, we have a number of people within the business environment, within employers and entrepreneurs and business owners that are indeed also quite worried on this transition. However, I will firmly say, and with confidence, that we are ready to take up the challenge and indeed fully support, and I've said this publicly already, the 55% reduction target by 2030, which has been endorsed by the European Council very recently. This, however, must be, in my mind, coupled with an enabling policy framework to ensure competitiveness and industrial transformation. It is clear that decarbonizing industry will load energy-intensive companies such as steel, cement, and the chemical sectors with high energy costs, while simultaneously imposing a massive structural change on the industrial, transport, and energy sectors, risking an economic disadvantage in what is a competitive global market. But this can be achieved if the EU's overarching climate policy objective is balanced with an ambitious industrial strategy that boosts competitiveness and an equal ambitious energy policy designed to ensure long-term security and affordability. At the same time, again, it is very clear that digital solutions are indispensable to empower progress toward the Green Deal goals. They contribute to smart energy distribution, advanced mobility solutions, and enable carbon tracking and monitoring. As Europe is lagging behind, unfortunately, in the digital development and high-speed connectivity, a digital deal for Europe is needed and should be given equal attention and strategic weight to the green transition. In my mind, again, and also this is a clear view of Group 1, we are looking at a double transition, which is the green transition and the digital transition. We are of the firm belief that European companies have the research capacity and the technological solutions to help our continent become a leading independent actor in the digital field. However, there is the missing parameter in the equation, and this is investment. Indeed, the recovery package will provide comprehensive public financial support, which, however, must be aligned with private funding if we want to make sure that we create the right conditions for a successful reconstruction. Finally, and most importantly, a resilient Europe is also a global Europe, one that keeps open its borders for business and prosperity. The current talk of export controls, I know it's related to the vaccine. However, this kind of thinking and this kind of thought is certainly not the kind of talk which does us as business much good. After the conclusion of the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement, it is now important to build a close and constructive relationship with the United Kingdom. Of course, we regret that the regulations for the service sector, the free flow of data, and mutual recognition of qualifications are not included. And we strongly believe, and this is also a message which I will give to Barnier tomorrow, we strongly believe that there is still more work that needs to be done to hammer out the finer details of this 1,400-page agreement between the UK and the EU. Of course, the turn of events in the United States are important, and I have a lot of trust and hope that this will provide us with the platform to revive the EU-US relations. Of course, without running away with the idea that this will be an easy process, because it will never be an easy process. But I think now the environment is much better, And in this new setting, the EU and US, I feel, must develop a joint vision on how to secure our mutual interests as liberal democratic powers, also as the foundation for future common trade agenda. Last but not least, China. After 7 years and 30 rounds of negotiations, the EU and China have finally concluded in principle, at the moment it's still in principle, an investment agreement. An investment deal is at this time the most promising way of deepening cooperation between China and the EU. With their agreement, both sides have showed that their strategic confidence in opening up a new space for cooperation. Dear friends and colleagues, despite the unprecedented crisis, our members and myself in the committee see unprecedented opportunities to create a new world where businesses can lead the way. I'm sure you agree and are ready to join forces to make a difference in Europe and beyond, and importantly, to make a difference for the people who represent our members. Thank you for this opportunity to debate with you, and I look forward to your interventions and the constructive debate with my members. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefano. That was already quite a lot of topics that you've mentioned there. So it will be very interesting to hear what our three speakers are going to add to this and where their sort of priorities lie at the moment. So without any further ado, let's get started with Veronique Willems, Secretary General of SMEunited. As I said, I'm sure the SMEs had easier times so far. So maybe you can start us off by telling us what is on the top of your list of worries at the moment.
Mrs. Willems, please press speak.
Is it working now? Okay, perfect, great. Yes, thank you first and foremost for inviting SMEunited to put forward our priorities for 2021. I probably will not surprise you when I say that the main priority for SMEs for 2021 is getting back to a full functioning of their activities and also focusing on their recovery. And as the current lockdown situation across Europe continues, first thing we see is increasing concerns on over-indebtedness of small and medium-sized companies. We are following up on this in exchanges with our member organizations, also banking federations, and we will use the roundtable of DG FISMA next week to also discuss possible creative means of restructuring. Next to that, we are also looking into the implementation of the new insolvency directive and the provision of early warning support to companies in difficulties. More in general, of course, it will be very important to make sure that our member organizations' contributions to the national recovery and resilience plans are well taken into account. A good balance between reforms on the one hand and investments on the other hand will have to ensure a resilience in the future of our companies. And next to that, we of course also focus on projects for digital and green transformation. On the digital side, I would like to highlight the existing and continuous need of a good infrastructure, not only in cities, but certainly also in rural areas, and the possibility for SMEs to make the necessary investments. On the Green Deal and the green transformation, we of course look towards the renovation wave that is a part of the national recovery and resilience plans. And also a very important element is the sustainability of the food chain. Continuing the current crisis situation, we continue to ask for a combination of short-time work schemes and skills development of those who are in those schemes. And we also ask for a multi-level and multi-actor approach to the national recovery and resilience plans to ensure an efficient use of the funds. Finally, we would like to call for attention for the differences between cities and rural areas, which again also during this crisis have increased. I would also like to call on the European Commission to strengthen the consultation process. We have seen last year that due to the very quick actions that were required in the crisis period, that consultation periods have been decreased. On the other hand, we also see that the Commission of course, wants to continue with their ambitious program and has been launching several consultations notably right before summer last year. And again, we saw an increase of consultations right before Christmas break. So we would like to ask to not make it a tick the box exercise, but really aim for meaningful contributions and input from stakeholders, and thus also provide them the necessary time to do so. Maybe a small note on Brexit to finalize my first intervention. We are exchanging among member associations at the moment to list outstanding issues to be solved for SMEs and to also support them in the new situation, making an overview of specific difficulties they encounter at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronique. And also thank you for sticking to the 5-minute time slot that we have meanly allocated to all of you only. Normally, I know you have much more time and it's much more interaction, but so then I would like to give the floor next to Markus Beyrer, and then we will come back with questions from the members and also to you individually. But I first would like to give all our speakers the opportunity to raise their main points. So Markus Beyrer has been living through a couple of crises already with Business Europe. So the question to you as well, what keeps you sort of sleepless at night at the moment? Markus, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Stefano, for inviting us, and thank you and the whole group for the very good cooperation. Pity that we cannot be in the same room, but I think you organized this well under the current circumstances. Well, I mean, I sleep quite well throughout the night, but the truth is, of course, the list of problems is long. And I mean, our priorities, I mean, this would take a very long time, but let me focus on the main points, and it's not so different from what Stefano has raised. So the first priority is, of course, to get the economy back on track and to get out of the crisis. What we are seeing is that industrial manufacturing production is relatively stable, driven by exports. So this is on the positive. On the other hand, of course, we also see that confidence, especially business confidence, is still low. Of course, with negative impacts on the investment and, of course, also consumer confidence. Even so, it improved a bit, is still way below we should be. So therefore, there will not be a lot of business investment, unfortunately, at the time being. And for now, we need the public investment to replace it. And people who know, we know that I'm not so much in favor of the state being a driver, but in crisis, and this is not the first one we see, we need the state and public investment to replace it. This is why it's so important that the resilience and recovery facility comes to track. And of course, and this will be something we'll be very much focusing at, is of course we need to spend this money well. And the trick will lie with the national recovery and resilience plans. And we will try to make sure, together with our members in the member states, that these plans have the right focus and that they will also focus on reforms, and that the money will really need to lead to the transformation we need in a couple of member states, if not all, because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So if we get it right, this can be a big step forward for Europe and the European economy. If we don't get it right, it might be a major obstacle for future steps in further integration, especially in fiscal policy. Which brings me to what Stefano has always also raised, this dual digital and green transition. And I agree, of course, with what has been said on digital. Let me lose some words on the Green Deal, because it's very important in order to come back on track that we get the Green Deal right. We support the Green Deal. We think it's crucial that this is one of the key pillars of the recovery, but we think it needs to be focused on investment, and we need to be rather careful on constraints and obligations, because we must not forget that we're in the middle of a crisis, and the crisis will be with us for a while. Stefano has mentioned the 55%. We stayed out of this debate. Because anyhow, it's a political debate. It's worth mentioning that 2 or 3 years ago, I mean, there was heavy debates about -40. Now the 55 went through relatively easily, I must say. But I think the main point is that we need to make sure to now focus on the how. How can we deliver this in a way not to not to harm the recovery, but on the contrary, to boost the economy? And how do we underpin this with an industrial strategy, or also, in other words, with a credible business plan? And there's a lot of things and a lot of questions which are still open. I mean, to give you just one example, I mean, we know that this will lead to heavy electrification. The question is, where will all the green electricity come from? Because for the time being, Europe neither has an import plan, nor does it have an own production plan. So this is just one point of many points we will need to find answers for. Another point is, of course, this taxonomy now for sustainable finance, which is per se a good idea. But the question is, how will we make sure that it works in practice? Because if I look at the debate, this is very much to make sure that not only the green is financed, but also the greening is financed, meaning the transformation of major industry players. Because otherwise we will not have the growth we need, and otherwise we will not achieve our climate goals. So the point is here, it's very much about the how. How do we get it right, and how do we really make it a growth driver? And our concern is that so far, even the Commission's own figures say the Green Deal, together with the 55% for the time being, is not the growth driver. So what we expect is to sit down, to talk about the major points, and to see what do we need to do to make it a major growth driver. My third point is we need an ambitious international and trade agenda, because, as I said it, what is still functioning now in this crisis, and this is a bit similar to former crises, and specifically also to the financial crisis, is that we see that the countries which have a competitive industrial and manufacturing base are doing better than the others. And we see that this sector is working mostly very much driven by exports. So therefore, we need to concentrate on the main points. In the US, we have a big chance now to go back to a better relationship and to solve the long list of issues there are. And this is solving the Airbus-Boeing conflict. This is about finding a joint solution on digital tax. This is about solving the data flow issue, and so on, and finding a common response to China. Of course, there is also other stories like the Buy America now, which is not a surprise, but we have a real chance here. And Business Europe today made a joint call with our US partner, the US Chamber of Commerce, on both sides, the European Commission and governments and the US government, to use this opportunity and specifying what we expect from them. Then, of course, China. There's a lot to say, and we have last year produced a strategic policy paper asking for rebalancing the relationship. And as Stefano has mentioned, the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, the CAI, we think, even so we're not naive, we know that now it will need to be, first, it will need to be ratified, but then, of course, it will need to be enforced. And the Chinese not always respect everything, but the deal as it stands is well negotiated and can be a real step forward in rebalancing the relationship between Europe and China. Very briefly, Mercosur. We think it's absolutely key to ratify this agreement for three reasons. First, for strategic reason. The crisis has shown us that we need to make our value chains more resilient. The best way to do so is to diversify imports and exports. And if we are not using this big opportunity with the largest market, which is about to open up to us, this would simply be crazy. Second, the strategic reason, we would have a first mover advantage, which will not be there forever. And third, but I can go deeper in discussion if you so wish, even if I would set aside these other reasons, and even if it was only for sustainability reasons and climate, in itself, this would be reason to ratify the agreement, because this is the only possibility to give us an instrument to move the Mercosurian and specifically the Brazilian government. And last sentence on the inevitable EU-UK new relationship. We have fought a lot to avoid the cliff edge, and we are very happy that this worked, because this would have been the last thing we would have needed in this situation. But of course, we know that, I mean, this agreement does not produce frictionless trade. I mean, there is, of course, things like rules of origin and so on, and a lot of solutions still need to be found. And the negotiations go on. What Stefano mentioned on the financial services or on data flows, there's interim solutions, financial services until end of March, data flows until end of June. And of course, we will need to find long-term solutions. And there's still a lot of work to do to really make sure that we contain and minimize the negative effects of the UK no longer being in the single market or in the customs union. But of course, this is a consequence of the UK wanting to diverge more from European rules. And of course, this doesn't lead to full access. But at the end of the day, we will need to make sure to have a good and functioning relationship with what is now our third most important international trading partner after the US and China. There's much more to say, but I'll stop here, Sandra, and looking forward to the debate. And once again, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Markus. Loads of different points. So please be prepared already. I will come back and ask you for some solutions. So that we don't only have a list of issues and troubles, but maybe also the key points that you would like together with us here at the EESC to actually bring forward and to sort of fight for. But before I ask more questions, I would like to hear now from Ben Butters, the Chief Executive Officer of EuroChambres. How is the situation for your members? I think they are really also in the midst of having to deal with demands from SMEs, but also rules and regulations from the national and the regional level. So again, you also have officially 5 minutes so that we have a bit time for actually asking questions and giving members the floor to come back to you. The floor is yours now.
Mr. Butter, please press raise hand, sorry.
Thank you very much, Sandra, for the introduction, and thank you to Stefano and everybody in Group 1 for this opportunity. Always very happy to meet up with you in whatever circumstances, and I think it's more important than ever that we work together collectively and effectively in response to this very difficult situation. The title of this session is Shaping the Post-COVID Recovery. It probably goes without saying, but we're still far from being able to talk about post-COVID in some respects. And many businesses are still encountering a lot of difficulties, lost income, reduced productivity. And this has led in some cases to downsizing and redundancies, but in others, unfortunately, even bankruptcies. So it's a really very difficult situation in which we find ourselves still. So it's really important that measures taken at EU and member state level to shield businesses from this situation, from the impact of the pandemic, are not rolled back too abruptly and too quickly. Short-term employment support, tax repayment solutions are very important, as are measures to support liquidity. But we need to start thinking in the longer term about how businesses deal with the accumulated losses that they are going to accrue, or they are accruing, in fact, as this will have a real knock-on effect on the recovery, because they're not going to be in a position to invest, and that is a very important ingredient in the recovery. So that needs to be thought about very carefully and integral to the recovery and resilience plan. Stefano covered a lot already in his introductory remarks. I don't think there's anything that we would disagree with as EuroChambers in those comments, nor indeed by those mentioned by Veronique and Markus before me. So I will just focus on 2 points which I think are really critical, and Chambers think are really critical to the post-COVID recovery from an EU perspective. The first is the single market. This is in many ways the jewel in the crown of the European project, and it must continue to be so. It's taken some hits during the crisis. Inevitably, measures have been imposed to restrict movement. We along with the chamber network, worked very quickly and very, we believe, effectively to identify obstacles to free movement early in the first lockdown, and a lot of these were addressed pretty promptly by the Commission, so that's very welcome. But now to move on and to start with the rebuilding and recovery process, we need to go beyond the pre-March 2020 situation and really tackle those remaining obstacles to free movement. The Commission came out with a single market enforcement package nearly a year ago. That really needs to gain some traction and to have some teeth if we are to tackle those remaining barriers. A lot of them are in the services sector. The European Parliament came up with a report on the services sector last week, which we very much welcome, but it's an own initiative report, and we need the member states and the Commission to work together with the Parliament to really tackle those challenges, many of which have been identified in that report and in work that we have done to look at problems that businesses encounter in doing business across the EU. The second point I would make is a very general one, but a very important one. It's about having an SME-friendly approach to policy making. The Commission work programme for this year is ambitious. Some of the key elements have been mentioned by Marcus, by Veronique and by Stefano, notably the Green Deal and the digital transition. These need to be approached in a manner that is favourable to small businesses and doesn't create more problems on top of everything that they are going through at the moment. That requires a very rigorous approach to consultation, but also to assessing the costs and benefits of proposals. The Green Deal is branded as a competitiveness strategy, and it has to be that if it is to help rather than hinder the recovery. And that means really costing the impact on small and medium-sized enterprises. And that applies to all pieces of legislation, all proposals that the Commission and the other institutions are working on. Tomorrow, the Jury Committee of the European Parliament is due to adopt a report on corporate due diligence and corporate accountability. And we're quite worried by the tone of that report. And we really need to underline that these processes, that reporting and other obligations in that field need to be business friendly and not lead to disproportionate and heavy costs for businesses throughout the supply chain, many of which are very small businesses. So that's a really important approach to SME-friendly policy making. If we don't get that right, then the recovery will be almost immediately in jeopardy. So it's very important that is dealt with correctly. I guess I can't leave without making one or two references to the EU-UK trade agreement. Let's not kid ourselves, this isn't going to help the business community. It's the first trade deal the EU has ever reached that will lead to worse trading conditions than beforehand. That's certainly not through any fault of the EU negotiators, but that's the reality. And we need to work together to make sure that those new barriers are mitigated as much as possible so that we're able to continue to trade with the UK as freely as possible, and to deal with those obstacles that are implied by the terms of that agreement. Thank you again, Sandra. I'll leave it there so we have time for questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Ben. Indeed, we have a little bit of time, so about 10-ish minutes. I ask the members who want to ask questions to raise their hands, and then also keep the questions short, please. Thank you for the speakers so far for sharing the concerns that you have, that you see from your members, where you hear are the most pressing issues. Maybe if I allow myself to get started with one question to Veronique. What is your impression? What is the feedback you get from the SMEs in terms of actually getting the financial support, so the money that has been made available officially for them? Have you any feedback on how much this has actually been taken up? Has this been sort of paid out? What's the situation there? One part of the question. Second part, could you give me maybe one topic where you think it would be really good that we, the group of employers here, and you sort of push for it? Floor is yours.
Yeah, well, depends on which money you mean, of course, because the money of the Next Generation EU is still to be spread out. That will be mid of this year if everything goes well. Concerning the support that the European Union provided last year in liquidity support, etc., there we see that member states are diffusing it, but in a very dispersed way, let's say. In some member states it's going well. In other member states we still get concerns from our member organization that entrepreneurs do not see the money that has been promised in a very clear way by the European Commission. And we've been also communicating last year that it's often also important to make sure that you only communicate when it's really in place on the ground, because you raise expectations among entrepreneurs that they will find a bag of money, so to speak, at their door from the European Union, and then it still has to go through the whole decision-making process, and by the time it gets to the companies, we are a few months further. So that's a very important element to take into account, I believe, also for European communications. Secondly, on where to work together, I think that it will be really important, as also been put forward by Ben and Marcus, that we make sure that there is sufficient funding to make the necessary investments for the future. If you would have asked me last year around this time, are SMEs ready to make the digital and the green transformation and the investments linked to that, I would have been confident that for the majority I could say yes, they are. Given the fact that many companies have been closed down 4 to 6 or even longer months in the past year, their investment capacity has been seriously taken down due to the fact that they have had to use their reserves to just keep the company afloat. So I think making sure that the necessary funding is there to make the transformation towards the digital and green. And then I would also like to support the call from Ben, which was clearer than my call for meaningful consultations. I think making sure that we put in place an SME-friendly policy making in the next few months will be key to ensure that SMEs can survive and then also thrive to keep the European economy active and afloat.
Thank you very much, Veronique. So then I will give the floor to the first person who raised their hand, Patricia Cires. The floor is yours. Quickly, and also if you could say who your question is addressed to.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, I will be very quick. Thank you for your presentation. I think my question is for all of them, especially for Marcus. Thank you so much for your intervention. I mean, one of the challenges we have is first to raise the value of business in society right now. So, I mean, more than ever, I mean, we have seen the essential services, the essential companies, I mean, throughout the whole sectors, act in a very responsible way. So I think this is a core message that we should continue to stress. That's my first remark. Then my second is more a question regarding how to promote mobility in the sense of, in the short term, the restrictions to mobility are there, of course. I mean, the pandemic and the public health is our first priority, but at the same time, we should restore the mobility within the single market. We have seen the value, the social value, the political value, and the economic value of mobility. So how do you think that mobility could be better coordinated in order to give a better response to those sectors that are more exposed to mobility? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. I will give the floor immediately to our next two members to ask their questions, and then we collect them so that all of you can answer them collectively. So the next one is Mr. Andersen. Christer Andersen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have a comment and a question to, in particular, Marcus Beyrer. Thank you first for 3 very excellent presentations, and I think there are many areas where we can cooperate and make a business view known and respected even more. I fully support the agenda of Business Europe on growth, trade and competitiveness. I think they are really key issues. I have one area where I'm concerned, and that was also addressed by EUROCHAMBRES, Mr. Butters, and that is on corporate governance issues. I think we do see initiatives from the Commission and elsewhere to also influence corporate governance in a negative way, impacting on ownership of businesses, regulations for the boardroom, dividend payments, and so on. There is a public consultation ongoing from the Commission on this until early February, where there are initiatives of a stakeholder model for the board. I think these corporate governance measures are really, really important and need to be addressed by all organizations. We recently got last week on public country-by-country reporting, which is another concern for our members. But I would like to thank in particular Markus Beyrer and BusinessEurope for excellent cooperation in many areas. I know very well the ECFIN area and the tax area, and I fully would like to thank for the efforts undertaken by the organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. I have one more person, or I see one more person on my list, and this is also all the time we actually unfortunately only have. So the floor would go to Mrs. Martinovic for her question, and then I will ask the speakers to come back.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for giving me the floor, and I would like to thank and I really appreciate all the presentations from our business organizations. I would like to raise two issues. One is related to the national recovery plans and the forthcoming recovery and resilience facility, and just want to repeat the importance of including the all stakeholders and business organizations in the preparation and implementation of these plans. I would also like to see how can we ensure that business organizations, and especially those that are not usually part of the semester process, are included in these preparations and implementations. And my second issue would go to single market that Ben raised, and the importance and the most imminent issues that are the current closures of the borders to curb the spread of the virus, and also the necessity to have a common approach to the essential travel and for service providers and for transport. Also, linked to the single market, once we get out or we start getting out of this crisis, it is important to have the coordinated lift of measures between the member states, the restrictive measures. And to that end, I believe DG GROW has initiated consultations with business organizations on the restrictive measures. So maybe we could work on this analysis of these measures that DG GROW has collected via the business organizations. And also, I believe the Parliament has recently asked for the collection of measures that have impacted SMEs, especially in the COVID times. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's one more person, final person now I see now on the list, and I will give him the floor before I indeed come back to the speakers, and then also to Stefano, who will do a bit of a wrap up. So it's Andreas Pangil. You have the floor for a short intervention and your question, please.
Mr. Pangl, please press speak.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for joining us, especially hello to Markus. Nice to meet you again, if it's virtual. My question is on online and e-business. In my opinion, and it's not only my opinion, Amazon is the great winner of the digitalization caused by the crisis. So can you give us a short overview or an impression how competitive are European companies in the online business, in the e-business?
That was perfect. Very short, like that. So yes, there have been a couple of questions going to Markus, so I think you will be the first one to come back to us. Maybe if I could just sort of say, as you hear from the interventions, all three of you, we are here in this group to also help your agenda, help support your work. So please use us and use our networks here as much as possible. I think I've seen today that in Euractiv, Gentiloni has been quoted as being calling for greater involvement of unions in the recovery plan. So I think there is something that we need to be sort of pushing towards, that not only the unions are the ones being included, but maybe also our communities. So, but then maybe the floor first goes to Marcus. Also with my little question, what would be your top item that you would like to sort of bring forward with us as the employers group here? Here we go.
Yes, thank you, Sandra. Well, I have a long list, so this will take an hour. So I'll try to do as brief as possible. First on Patricia. Well, I think the value of business, this is key, because we see that, I mean, if we look at the work program of the European Commission, as far as a business agenda is concerned, it's a bit of a fail. There's a chapter, an economy that works for people, but it's only social policy. So this is something where we need to show and ask for that. I mean, it is business, it is companies which will produce the recovery, and this needs to be acknowledged. So we need to together make sure that we raise our voice to make this understood everywhere. The second point is, but this is for later, unfortunately, politicians get used to that the state now does everything again, and then there's a ban raised, and I'm of the same opinion. Of course, we are in a situation where we need the state, and it's important that the support measures don't end too early, because this would make everything worse. But there will come the day and the moment, and I think this will also be our role to say, okay, but now we need to go back to market economy, or I mean, fully go back to market economy, and there's here a certain danger that this will not be without problems. The mobility, I mean, again, a very long topic, Patricia, but I think what we need is, and I have criticized Merkel, by the way, recently, we need more coordination, we need transparency, we need mutual recognition of tests, and we need a common plan to make sure that this is held to the lowest level. On the grow action, on the positive side, I mean, in the lockdown one, we had a lot of issues which affected the single market on a daily basis, which we referred to DG Grow, and they reacted. So we get very few real single market issues now, but of course we get the concern and the free movement of people, and this is what we need to work on. On Krista, thank you, Krista, for this question, because you are totally right on the corporate governance. Linked to this, of course, there's also the due diligence in global value chains. Both important topics. The second one, very SME relevant, to stay with SMEs, and both dangerous, because the first one, the corporate governance issue, based on wrong studies, where 1/3 of the companies which have been looked at are British companies, which are not even part of the regulation area anymore. And on the due diligence, I mean, to just put it in one sentence, it's absolutely inappropriate to ask companies to be responsible for things which are totally out of their control. So we cannot afford that the state hands over the issues it's not able to control by itself to companies, certainly not in this situation. And again, I mean, this is a real SME issue. On Dragica, very briefly, I think the single market I addressed. We together, all social partners, have all the time called on the Commission, on the President of the Council, on the presidencies, to make sure that the social partners on the ground are involved in the elaboration of the national recovery and resilience plans. We have asked our members, and I think the colleagues are doing the same, to give us feedback, where does this not work? And we have the promise of Valdis Dombrovskis that we can notify these cases to him, and that he would directly address the member states where it's not working. So whenever one of you sees a concrete problem, of course, we are happy to take this information and to raise it. And last but not least, Andreas, also nice to see you, at least on the screen. well, obviously there's points where we are lagging behind. We see the recent proposal of the Commission positively, even so they will need to be forwarded in the right balance at the end of the day. Of course, I mean, to talk about where did we fall behind the Americans and the Chinese, this would cover a full hour. But you're right, of course, that we now have the opportunity with the money available in the digital transformation to try to catch up there. And one last sentence here: I don't think we will be able to repair fully what has been missed for personal data over the last decade. But I think we absolutely need to make sure that we do not miss out similarly on industrial data, where our strengths lie and where we need to make sure that this is a field where we stay ahead and will not be surpassed by China and the US. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Markus, for those insights. And also very interesting and important to know that Dombrovskis is going to be a bit of a sort of watchdog for the consultations. So then I give the floor to Ben. There has been a couple of questions also in your direction.
Thank you. Christian Andersen made the point about corporate governance issues, building on my comments, and I fully agree with his remarks about the importance of approaching these topics from the perspective of businesses. This isn't just for big businesses. This isn't just for listed companies. Some of these have a knock-on effect throughout the supply chain and can really go down to the very smallest companies as well. And we need, on all of these issues, to remember the cumulative burden. So it's dangerous when policymakers just look at a particular dossier in isolation without being aware of the broader context of what businesses have to comply with, either in the same area or in a related field, because the smaller the company, the bigger that burden becomes proportionately. So it's a very important aspect of the Commission work programme that they get that balance right. The signals are a little bit worrying, as I mentioned. So we need to work on that together, and it could be something, I believe, where the Economic and Social Committee could be of added value. Dragica made a point about the involvement of stakeholders in the recovery and resilience plans. That's certainly something that we would share, and I agree that philosophy must be broadened out from the typical semester process, because this is not a typical situation that we find ourselves in. So all key stakeholders need to be involved in a real manner, not just lip service, a quick question to stakeholders, but really involve them in defining the priorities and also monitoring the process and the implementation afterwards. And again, that could be somewhere where the Economic and Social Committee could help us. We could potentially work together to see how those plans are elaborated, and then further on review their impact and their monitoring processes. Yeah, and I'm not saying anything that will surprise anybody here, but on mobility and on the single market, in response to both Dragica and Patricia Sirez, yes, a common approach is of course critical. I don't think anybody today is in a position to be too sure about what that common approach can be, because the situation is evolving all the time. But it's really important that the member states work together, and that the business community, their staff, their employees, the entrepreneurs know where they stand, so that they can plan ahead and get access to the full opportunities of the single market as quickly as possible.
Thank you very much, Ben. And then the last 2 or so minutes also for Veronique to come back again to some of the questions that have been raised.
Thank you. I would like to come back to 3 questions. First one from Christer, also on the corporate governance, due diligence, non-financial reporting, because I think that there are several similar actions going on in a parallel way. Making sure that these are SME friendly, and there I agree with Ben and Markus, is very important. We've been following up very closely the work from EFRAG on the non-financial reporting. We will also be following closely the due diligence, and on the other side, the taxonomy is also very closely on our radar. and trying to provide proposals and make sure that whatever comes out is workable and feasible for SMEs. Concerning the national recovery and resilience plans, I think that also the European Economic and Social Committee is doing a good job in following up on what is going on in the European semester process, informing their members and making sure that they are aware when and how to interact. At SMEunited, we have immediately set up a support structure for our organizations within the frame of the European semester activities we already had, making sure that they know who to contact, when to contact, and also exchange on proposals they could make to contribute to a good SME recovery after the crisis or even during the crisis. And then a last element on the digital economy. I think that the proposals from the European Commission on the Digital Services Act, Digital Market Act, are going into the right direction. On the one hand, modernizing the framework that is in place for digital business. On the other hand, also ensuring a level playing field towards SMEs, making sure that gatekeeper platforms also work within certain rules. And to conclude there, I think it will be very crucial to make sure that entrepreneurs across the European Union acquire the right skills to integrate digitalization in their business model, so that they can start moving forward and possibly also taking the lead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronique. Thank you to all three speakers for giving us this overview of the topics that are of key concern for the business community and for making us aware again, and also for providing us with your insights. So the last 2 minutes, Stefano, we got 2 more from the interpreters. So I will give you the floor to wrap up and this meeting, and look forward to have the next exchange with our 3 speakers and with our partners there. So Stefano, il Presidente, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you for the work done. I will first and foremost thank our 3 friends and our 3 colleagues for the time they have given us, and also for the insights that they have given us, which I always find extremely valuable. Just to leave one thought in the discussion, in my view, the race towards establishing, let's say, the most economically sustainable green business model is on. The way I see it is that there is a 3-legged race. It's between us, between China and the US, and we have no option except to compete. Now, whoever wins this race, the way I see it, is going to lead the global economy. And I say this because the momentum towards greening of the economy at a political level is very strong. And although we are suffering tremendously at the economic level, I much suspect that the political level today, because also it has the backing, I would say, even of the general population. This morning I saw a survey of the United Nations, a survey carried out on 1.2 million people, where 64 defined the climate situation as a global emergency. So when I see these factors, it's clear that we have to go down this route, and I think it is up to us to continue to take advantage of already the very good platform we have on clean technologies. Having said that, I do promise you, as our colleagues and friends, and also the members of Group 1, that we will create opportunities where we can have more time for more discussion, because I believe that these issues merit much and much more discussion. And also we will create events between us as business partners. So once again, thank you, Veronique, thank you, Marcus, and thank you, Ben. And let's continue cooperating and discussing and seeing how we can move in these very uncertain and difficult times. Thank you once again.